Hello, superstar teachers. Today, I'm going to model what my expectations are for what you're supposed to do when you come to collaborative planning. This past year, collaborative planning was more focused on conversations and you talking through the work. But this upcoming school year, my expectation is that it's a full, deliberate practice of what you're putting before children. So today in this lesson, you're going to see me model and break down the standard, talk through some concepts, show you what the intentions are and how that practice will work in the classroom. I'm also going to be modeling how arts integration ties to this lesson as a quick way to introduce concepts to students. Now for this lesson in particular, I'm using arts enhancement, not the full integration piece, but I'm just showing you how this can play a part in introducing concepts for a math lesson. So for today in my demonstration, I'm doing a 4th grade math lesson, and my beginning piece, I'm starting with our key words. Remember, in our school, we're going to be focusing on prelude and postlude as the common language, not do, now, and exit ticket. So for the prelude today, we're going to look through this problem. The digit 4 in the number 40,000 has 10 times the value of the digit 4 in the number what? What would you think the answer would be for that? This would be what I'm modeling for kids. So I'm going to do this as a quick check to see what students would be, because they've already reviewed standard form in a previous lesson, so I know they know what this would be. So what they would look at is what is 40 times that in the amount. And so based on what we have, we would look at what the students would mark. So we know that 8 would be the correct answer, and I will be looking to see how students are doing that in their placement. So I know what the correct answer would be, and I will be talking through and looking around the room to see what students had. If I had this in a real projection room, I may use an app like PollLab, or I may use something like Quizlet to allow me to see quickly where students lie within that answer. But for this demonstration lesson, I'm just going through so you'll know what the answer could be and where we could see where children could do in this timing. So for my prelude, that would be the question I would ask students. Then the next thing I would do is go through the agenda. So I want to make sure that we review the PBO for the lesson every single time we get before me. I want you to model the I do. I'm going to model the I do for you today. I'm also going to model the we do. I want to be clear that the I do and the we do both work together. What I see in the I do should be the exact same in the we do. I don't want to see a I do problem and then the we do does not match your I do. So make sure when you start coming to collaborative planning, all of that will be intact. Your PowerPoints needs to already be set up to be in this framework. Then the you do should be a branch off of what we did in the we do. And then you can do an exit ticket unless you're teaching multiple concepts. For this lesson, I'm going to teach 2 concepts to break down the standard to ensure that students have both parts before I get to the exit ticket, and then we can do our closeout. You will also catch me seeing how I'm going to do my check for understandings, and you will also catch me doing some partner sharing and work with the students. So based on this, here is our PBO. Students will be able to read, write multi-digit whole numbers using standard form, word form, and expanded form in order to compare 2 multi-digit numbers based on the values of the digits in each place using greater than, equal to, less than to show the relationship. And as in a traditional statement, we will review our words in the PBO, so students will do their call and response. As we go through it, all the words in red, students will read out and the definition and talk through those concepts. And then we would really look down into what we need to do for the standard. So in this standard, I'm expecting students to compare 2 multi-digit numbers, and that's what our entire lesson will be focused on today based on the standard. I will start with a think, prayer, share as an open up before we get into the work. I want students to share in their own words what they received from the PBO. So this would probably be a lesson that would be given on a Monday in class. So in there, I'm just making sure that they are clear with what's expected for them to perform for me at the end of the lesson based on the PBO that I presented. here are some key things that I want us to talk through and some preconceptions. I want children to know how important. Sometimes numbers are not always available to place on paper when we don't understand it. Because sometimes I know children may not understand that when they see numbers put on paper, they may not understand its true place of value. Then I'm also going to look to see what math strategies are we using to deepen that understanding of what they're reading and how they can compare numbers that may be alike or different. It's important to use these context clues in the work because if they're not seeing the numbers and seeing where place there would be some areas that they would be struggling with, and I need to be looking out for that as I teach the lesson. Then I will go into another think, prayer, share, just having them share with the group, sharing on the following concepts in their own words. Why is it important that we learn about the placement of numbers and its values and how to make informed decisions based on the placement of that exact number? Because you can see the number 9 in our brain, we know 9 is greater than 4, but where is the 9 placed in the graph? And so we'll be looking at that. I will look at how will you know you mastered this standard. I want you to be very intentional in your PowerPoints this upcoming year by always putting this question before children. They need to know how they would be how this would be. This ties back to the TIM score when you're breaking down the objective to students and allowing them to know how they would be assessed. So students, based on what I broke down in the standard, should be able to compare numbers based on the meanings of the digits using greater than, less than, or equal to record their comparison. In the long run, they should be able to compare and contrast numbers based on the placement of the value of it. How will this look on TCAP is another thing. Before you break down lessons, I want you to start putting TCAP questions right there in the PowerPoint. This is before we go into the full thing. I want them to see that this question will come up again in TCAP and this is how it will look. So in the comparison question, it says an incomplete comparison is shown. 13,426, 12,389. Devin says 13,426 is greater. Bill says 12,389 is greater. The question asks them, who is correct and why? Because of what we're going to learn in this lesson, students should be able to come back and complete this question based on their scenario. So no, I don't want them to solve this because this is something we can come back to in the lesson as we go to the end. But I want them to be familiar with this, and it is very intentional that you put those TCAP questions in the PowerPoint before you start breaking down lesson so they will see how this will look in the end game. So here I have another think, prayer, share. Just asking them to talk about how this looks on TCAP so they can think about it. Just put it in their mind. What will I be using to assess me on this? Knowing two things, how to compare numbers and knowing the place value of a number. And then be able to articulate where those numbers are in this current place value. Those are things that are very important for this lesson to work together. So, as I go into my introduction and really start through the work after students finish conversation, I'm going to cap it off with an intro song. So I wrote this song called Do You Know Your Place? It's relevant to what we're learning into the language. So I'm going to go through this song for you all to see. And it's really a format of a rap. Do you know your place? And students repeat after me. So Ms. Jones, repeat after me. Do you know your place?
Do you know your place?
Find it in the space.
Find it in the space.
Is it big or small?
Is it big or small?
Are they same or different?
Are they same or different?
Is it greater than
Is it greater than
or less than?
or less than?
Do you know your place?
Do you know your place?
Find it in the space.
Find it in the
What
space.
did we use? Greater than, less than, and equal signs. Those are three signs that I want you to be able to know when we go through our lesson on today. So just using this as a quick thing, it's something that you can introduce to the student, but it's gearing their minds up to the focus of what they're learning for the day, but it's a quick capture, and you're breaking down content that they're expected to do by the time the lesson ends. Now, as we know how we do in the I Do, I want to model the I Do lesson. You know that students do not do the I do with you. So all eyes will be on me. I'm doing my all eyes on me, and we're focusing. I could use the Actors Toolbox and get students to come together and then having them do the focus cooperation activities and bridge those things together to have them watching me for the I do. So those are practices you've already learned. So this one is asking me, where does this number belong? Okay? What I need to know are three things in this activity. I need to locate the place values for each number. I need to state their value. And then I need to transform it into word form. So this number will read in word form as blank at the end when you look through it. Based on what we have learned in previous in place value, we know we should have our little things in place. So we can write ones. I know I have 7 ones. I know I have 8 tens. I know I have 400s. I also see I have 3,000s. So breaking this down, what does that look like for me? I know to place my 7 in the ones area. I know to place my 8 in the tens area. I know to place my 4 in the hundreds area. And I also know to place my 3 in the thousands area based on what I already have. So I see the 3,000 matches the 3, the 400s match the 4, the 8 tens match the 8, and the 7 ones match the 7 in the ones placement. When I want to articulate this, I want to read this based on us reading from right to left. Let's talk about that, okay? When we're looking at it, left to right in this format, and right to left is where we place it. You start from right and move down when you're writing your number. But when you read it, you want to read it from left to right. So let's review that again. We place numbers from right to left and we read it from left to right. Those are conceptions that I know students have to be reminded on as we go through and placing numbers. So they always know to start in the ones and go back. So that is our right to left in practice. But when we read it, we always want to go from left to right. I want students to be able to read it from left to right. So Ms. Jones, based on what we see, what does that look like it says if we had to articulate this?
3,487.
3,487 would be what I would say in word form. And that's what I'm looking at in my word model. Me just as an I do, thinking through this process would articulate to students 3,487. That would be every little step that we asked us to do based on our standard. So did we locate the values for each number? That's what I'm going to ask. We located our values. Did we state the value? We did state the value. Did we transform it into word form? We transformed it into word form. So those 3 things that I did, I modeled for the I do. Now I'm going to look at I want to do another I do just to make sure that everybody understands what I'm doing. Because of what I did in the previous activity, remember I'm locating the place value. So I still have an additional one just for modeling and seeing that that works and working through that. I know I will have 7 ones. So this is a good opportunity to model thinking aloud. So you can think through those processes. It says I have 0 tens. So should I put something in the 0 tens? No, because I don't have any. So those are things I could already articulate as I'm thinking aloud. I see that I have 600, so I know I can write my 600s in this place. I see that I have 9,000s, so I'm going to write it 9 times. And I have something different than I did the last number. This one is a 2-digit. So there are some times you can look at it where we're trying to do our place value. This is different than the other number, but we're still doing the same practice. We're still locating the place value, we're still stating the value, and we're still transforming it into word. And my last piece would be me writing 10,000s 5 times. Remember, we have to do something. As we write it, we go from right to left. When we read it, we say it left to right. So based on what I have, I can place my numbers in its place, giving me the exact same framework that I saw on the screen. Reading it aloud, I could say 59,607. That's how I would read this math problem and articulate it, and helping students understand that if I see any misconceptions by scrolling through that process, I'm reading the word out. Based on that practice, I am able to move on into the we do and scan the room. So checking for understanding is key right after you do that I do. That's what I want us to immediately start checking for understanding, making sure after we can model. We want to make sure that students use their whiteboard. So for this activity, they will have whiteboards. I will have all of that in place. And the question says, what strategy will help me? What strategy helped Dr. Hines put together the numbers? Based on what they thought. Was it based on the numbers in order, the placement of the comma, the teacher example, or what they inferred from their learning? So, thinking about it, what helps you get your right number in place? Write down what you think. Write which answer, option A, B, C, or D on your whiteboard. So I would have students write down their option, whether it's A, B, C, or D. Okay? So the strategy to help students, she thought about where the numbers would be in order. Is it about numbers in order in place value? It really, because there's numbers all over the place. It really is about the placement of the comma. So I can already see if she wrote A and some wrote B, where I'm looking at is the placement of the comma so that they can know where their placements are in the box. So those are things you can check for understanding and immediately case. Then look at this part B. Erase your whiteboard. Which piece of the evidence supports your answer for part A? Numbers can arrange in a variety of orders. Do we know that? When I read from left to right. Do we know that? Because those are things that help. Or the placement of the comma helps me determine what my number should be, or I know my place value. A child should know all 4 of those things, but which one of these could be articulated? Miss Jones, write down on the sample what you think your opinion is based on that for part B's question. What would you use to support part A? She wrote C, based on 2 things. because what we talked about in the I do and me talking about the place on the comma helps me determine my place value. So those are things I know we are ready to move on into the lesson. Based on that, I can then go into my we do's and be very particular on when you're going into your I do and we do section, because you want to make sure that they're ready to transition into that area by just doing some quick checks for understanding. Still in this concept, students must do three things: locate the place values for each number, state the value, and then transform it into word form. So together, I have two different numbers. We're going to do the same activity like we did in the I do. So talk me through this, Miss Jones. Let's look at our first number, 287,493. Where do we need to start in writing this down? Tell me what we need to do.
We need to start from our right, so we'll start with our ones.
All right, what will we write in our ones?
3.
Write ones or write 3?
We're going to write ones 3 times.
We're going to write ones 3 times. Do we agree or disagree, class? That's what we'll look to see. You checking for understanding just to make sure we all on the same page. What would I do with the 9?
You will put your 9. You will write 9. You will write 10 9 times.
I would write 10 9 times. I would not write the number 9 because it's not about the number. We do the number when. Based on the I do. Think back when I did in the I do. When did we place the number?
What we going to do?
When we were trying to go into word form. So here we're just placing the word tens 9 times to ensure that we have our tens in place. All right, what about the 4?
You'll go over your hundreds place and you'll put hundreds 4 times.
And I will put my hundreds in my place 4 times. That's correct. What about this 7 I have up here? What would I do with that?
You will put your 7. You will put that thousands 7 times.
Thousands, not the number 7. So you put thousands in that place. So I'm realizing my handwriting, I have to write smaller so it can fit into my box, because the more it gets, the more I cannot have it. And I'm just writing to make sure I have my 7 in there, right? We also have, got my 7 in. We also have 2 additional numbers that we did not see in our concept, but we're still taking the same place value. So, you know, we went from 1 to 2, and now I see 3. That's different, but it's still place value. So here I have the 8. What would I do with 8?
You will put 10,000 8 times.
Hold up. I'm gonna keep that in there. So I'm gonna move that. All right. So for this one, you are right. I would put 10,000 8 times. So because I have a lot of wording and I have to write this 8 times, I'm going to write this in short form just to make sure that I have it accounted for. But I do know that I'm using 10,000. And I have my 4. I have my 4 on this side. And then I have my,
Your 100,000, so you will write that twice.
I will write that one twice. Still, because I know I have a lot, I'm just going to write that in short form to make sure that I have it. But on your own personal charts, on your whiteboards, you can write that out in its entirety. I don't have the space to do it, but I can at least model this so that the students can do it, and it's only one. All right, scratch through that. So I have my numbers in place. Based on what we practiced in the I do, what Dr. Hines did, what would be my next step?
To go in and put the numbers from
put the numbers in its place value. So this would be my 3. This would be my
9,
this would be my
4,
this would be my
7,
this would be my
8,
and this would be my.
2.
So everything matches up, and we see the comma being our separation point, correct? So how would I read this number?
200,000.
200,000? Or should we put it all together? 287,000. So should that be 287,000? Because it's all in its place. It's still your value. And then you can repeat the last 3 numbers, which would be 493. So 287,493 will be how we read the number in word form. Are we correct on that? We agree? All right. Since you're saying we are, I want to test the water. I'm going to walk through this, and I want you to walk me through the steps, making sure we're doing the exact same thing. So I'm going to remove what we have from this screen. So now we're going to look at it one more time to make sure before we let you practice it by yourselves. I want to look at this number. I see my number on the board, right? We're going to be very intentional on placing and doing the same activity like we did the first time. This time, I want you to model to me and tell me what I need to write on the board without me asking, okay? So, Ms. Jones, help me with this placement of value with this number we see on the screen.
You're gonna start your ones. I know that there are 2 ones, so I'm gonna write ones twice.
Okay? All right, what's next?
I'm gonna have 5, so I'm gonna write 10s 5 times.
And as we go through, I could also ask children to check this as well. Do we agree or disagree? If you don't agree, say why. Okay? What about the 9?
I'm gonna write hundreds 9 times.
I'm going to write hundreds 9 times. Okay? What would I do with these other 2 that we see?
I'm gonna write it twice
Where?
in the thousands place.
And what am I going to write?
Thousands.
Thousands. Okay? I have.
4.
What would I do with the 4?
I'm gonna put it in my 10,000s place.
Okay, and where would I write it?
10,000s 4 times.
Excellent. And I have a number 7. Where would I place that?
In my hundreds, thousands place, and I would write 100,000 7 times.
7 times, okay? So because I have a lot going here, I'm going to short form this so that I know when I'm writing, I can still account for it. Okay, so I have my 7, I have my 10,000s, I have my thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones in this place. Everything's matching. What do I do next? What's my next step?
Now I'm going to place my numbers.
Okay, so what goes here?
2,
What goes here?
5,
What goes here?
9,
What goes here?
2,
What goes here?
4,
What goes here?
7.
Excellent. Where does the comma go?
The comma goes between the 2 and the 9.
Excellent. So those things are already in place. We have started from right to left. Now we're going to read it from left to right. All right, so what could we all say this would read as if we read it out loud? What would you say? 742,952. All right, with that being said, I think we can move on to the next piece. Do you think we can move on to the next piece?
Yes.
All right, checking for understanding. Because I just modeled a we do. I want us to make sure we're still on the same page. What strategy, same question, helped you figure out where to put your numbers as we talk through it together? Was it the numbers in order? Was it the placement of the comma, the teacher example, or how you inferred the problem when you were reading through? Then I want you to tell me which piece of evidence supports your answer for A. So go ahead and write 2 answers. I want to see your first answer, then draw a line. And then the second answer, your part B. So I see the placement of the comma, and the last option you said, the placement of the comma helps me determine where my numbers should be. Is that correct, class? And I'm checking for understanding to make sure that we are seeing that. Now, if you want to be creative in this activity, you could use PollLab or you could use Quizlet to poll these numbers and get instant data on your screen. So that depends on which apps you choose to use, okay? But that's an opportunity to add this into the lesson and enhance it. But based on that, we could see that the majority of the students did say B, if I check the room, and that I saw them all marking C based on what we modeled from the previous 2 activities. I will move on into the you do in pairs. So, the you do in pairs is going to be a little different because now I want to really see how they can take numbers. It's going to say, draw the label following the numbers on the screen. Use each digit once. So they have 6 numbers. And they will have an opportunity to take the 6 numbers and arrange them however they want it to be. But what we want to make sure they can articulate are the same 3 things that we said at the beginning. 1, locate the place value. 2, state those values. And then transform it into word form. So, Miss Jones, I have 6 numbers for you. 987310. Go ahead and write that on your whiteboard however you want it to be. You have 6 numbers. We're missing 1 number. You have the 0. Where you want to put your 0? Okay? So you left yours the same. All right. Other students could have a different way of placing the numbers because you're asking them to place the number however they need to place it on the screen. And so they will write the numbers, then take their 6 numbers with their partner and think through how they need to look. So let's just think through some of that. If we were students and we were sitting here together, we could talk about, let's put the 8 at the beginning. So how do we remind us how we do numbers on placing? We start from right to left. So we would start with 8 in the ones place. What we could look at is playing with our numbers. So this manipulative will be in place for us to show in partners. So what can we agree with in our placement? We want to put the 8 first. So we're going to put our 8. We want the number 8. All right, what do we want it to be in the next place?
3.
3, okay, so we'll put 3 in the next place. So actually it'll be where you see ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000, stuff like that. So we have to make sure that we all having it because the backside has millions. Here it is. So we got our 8, okay, and we have our 3, we're agreeing to put our 3 in this place. All right, then we said we have 3 and 8 taken care of. What about 7, 9, and the other numbers. What do you want to put there for that area? So I got my 3 in place. Let's use 9 since we right there, okay? So we're gonna put our 9 in this space. So you have to go through your little flip chart and put your numbers there. That thousands makes us have a comma. So can we agree that 0 would be there?
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna put the 0 in that space. Then we have 10,000. So how many numbers do we really have left?
You just have one number left. 2.
2 numbers left. I see we have 7 and we have the number 1. We have 1 and 7 left. So which one would you like to make 7 and which one would you like to make 1?
I'll make 10,000. Make that a 7.
Okay, so let's do that. We'll make the 7. And then that makes us have 100,000 as a 1. Correct? Did we use all of the numbers once, like the instructions said?
Yes.
So as a teacher, we could go around and check, and we'll ask them to throw what they decided as a team. So this is what we came up with in our numbers, correct? So, knowing our place, teams will get an opportunity to present their numbers and what they had, drawing it out, the different things. So then the next thing would be write it on your whiteboard, how in its appropriate place. So you can use either side of your whiteboard. We'll make sure you're erasing. And working through our steps. So I always give it some dry off. We get me a dry napkin so we can wipe that or get it erased if you have to erase it. Okay, so show us, Miss Jones, in your chart, the same way we practice in the we do. What should it say based on what we have here, writing the chart out? So what we're gonna do, draw our chart.
So I'm gonna draw a chart.
And we're gonna label our chart with our place value.
12 ones. I have 10. I have hundreds. I have thousands. I have 10,000.
And last you have
100,000.
yes. So how many times will we write the word ones under the eights section?
You're gonna write it 8 times.
8 times. So we're gonna write, and you can write it underneath there straight down because you have more room than I had. So I would write ones 8 times because that's the first number we're looking at. And reminding you that we're gonna always work from right to left when placing the number. Okay, one more time. How many times would I have the word tens?
3 times.
So we write tens 3 times. How many times would I have the word hundreds?
9 times.
So I write 100 9 times. So you can just write it straight down, the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. how many times would I write the word 100,000s?
0.
100,000s. We are 100,000s.
We'll start on here. 1.
Yeah, 1. How many times would this be?
7 times.
Okay, so then how many times would that be?
0.
So that's what'll help you determine what you're writing. So go ahead and put 0 there, because you know nothing to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And then here you would have 10,000s. And like when I modeled for you, you can write it in short form to make sure you account. So you write your 7 of this one and your 1 time for that when you place it on the whiteboard. Because our numbers are going to be different, everybody's chart will look different because each group had the opportunity to work their numbers in comparison. So depending on what numbers they pulled up as a team, they should already have that and articulate that when you rotate around the room. So each group gets a set of numbers. So these are planning pieces that I will bring to collaborative planning to demonstrate what I'm going to use and how that application works with the kids as we model through it. So yes, what was important for my lesson is to have these place value charts so that students could see these numbers, see them with its proper place, because the comma would be always in the right number space, and they can know, depending on where they're going, where they need to place the numbers and how that needs to look. So based on what she wrote, what would be the next step if we're working through this as a partner? We have written our numbers, we have decided our place, so we have located the place value for the numbers. We are stating their value, so what are we going to do? Write the 8s,
In the 1's place.
write the 3,
In the 10's place.
the 9,
In the 100's place.
the 0,
In the 1000's place.
the 7,
In the 10,000's place.
the 100,000s.
1. In the
1.
1,000's.
Excellent. So based on that, what can we say when we want to transform this into word form?
170,938.
And then the different groups will have their opportunity to talk through that as their pieces. But as a teacher, you will make sure you're rotating around the room. Those are things you can say to us in the collaborative planning, but not necessarily demonstrating. But we want to really be intentional in modeling this practice and showing that work. So it won't be about explaining it. It's about us looking at it and doing it. That shows that she was able to articulate 2 things. One, what we did in the I do and the we do, and in their groups, they were also able to model the same thing. Turn and talk with your partner about the placement of the numbers and things that will lead them. Those are conversation pieces you can capture when you're monitoring the room space. Because of that, we also know that students are able to think, pair, share again. Loving this think, pair, share, but we definitely can use in the different types of partnerships. It's just for this lesson I'm modeling think, pair, share. Looking at the numbers you place on your work, are the numbers labeled and match your word form? Based on what we saw in her placement and what they had on their charts, everything matched. So I'm seeing some consistency with what they're learning and how that flows together. And we know that they have their place and they could talk through that. Then I want to go up a notch. So depending on lesson time, because I know this lesson will run a good hour, I have enough time to do both skills. Going back to the standard was important, but I really wanted them to be articulate on where they were placing numbers and can they articulate the place value on the first round. The second round, we're going to take this up and talk about comparing and contrasting like we introduced at the beginning. So for round 2, I want students to be able to look at numbers from a different concept. Which one is higher and lower? Which one is the greatest and which one is not? What we will need for this round is something new. It's called a comparison circle. So on your whiteboards, draw a big circle on there. That's what we're going to call the comparison circle. And I'll have students draw that. This comparison circle will be used for us to place our greater than sign, our less than sign, or we can place our equal to sign. So those are the only three symbols we're going to be able to get in this second round using these symbols to be able to tell me two things. Going backwards, I also have to know that students need to use that next skill. So this could be if this was a day 2 activity, or if you only had a short amount of time, it depends on your instructional lesson. If you had a day 2, this would be day 2's lesson, but the PBO stayed the same. But what would we need for students to do based on their previous knowledge? Still know their place value. And this would be talking about the comparison of the comparison circles. What do they think about that? And why do they need to put those symbols in there? What would they believe that would be? Those are things I could look for when I scan the room. Locating the place value is still going to be one of the priorities we need to do. Then stating the value, and then determining which number is highest to lowest. And the next thing is we're going to have to be able to compare and contrast those numbers to see which one. So that's why I said determining which number is the highest and the lowest of the two is our comparison. And we'll use our comparison circle for that. Because of this, we're still keeping our same standard, making sure that we compare 2-digit numbers based on the values and digits, reminding students of how important it is and the name of the unit. Still in my concept, I'm calling the room to focus. I may use my Actors Toolbox and get them on focus to be with the idea, just for a model case. So for this one, Jones, I still have 2 numbers. Help me with this. I'm going to do this first, thinking aloud and placing. I see my first number has 0, so I will not put anything there. It's just going to be blank. I see I have a number in the tens place, and I only have to write it one time. I see I do not have any numbers in the hundreds place, so I don't have to put anything there. And I have number 3 in the thousands place, which makes me write out thousands 3 times. I also see my same steps that we used in the previous, that if I'm going to use this, I still have to read right to left. So I know I have my 0, my 1, my 0, and my 3 with my comma going there. I know to read this out as 3,000, nothing for hundreds, and 10. It's different. 3,010. Because I didn't have anything in the numbers for the 100, I don't have to say anything because the real number was at 10, so it's 3,010. Okay? So I also have a different number. I'm going to do my same placements. Still nothing here. But there's a 4 in the tens place, so I'm going to write 4 times. I have nothing here, so that would be a 0. And I have my thousands, and that would be 1,000 2 times. Because of what we learned in our first 2 statements, locating the place value, we have located it, we have stated those values. Now it's asking me to go up one more step. I have to compare to see which number is greater than and less than. So this is how we can look for comparison. We're looking at the highest value of the numbers depending on where those numbers place. So if the numbers in the hundreds thousand, are they in the 10,000? Are they thousands, hundreds, tens, ones? Which number in each place is higher or lower? We see in this problem that it is a 0, so there's nothing to compare, right? We see here that the 1 is lower than the 4. But does that mean that the value is lower? No, it does not. We see the 0 is still the same. But this is the magic one that catches us. Whatever number ends is the starting placement of it, because you remember we read from left to right. So it matters on whichever number is in the last place. Now, which of those 2 numbers are higher or lower? Is 2 greater than 3 based on your number in the count? Or is 3 greater? So because of that, you can think through those concepts and help students explain what that will look like. Placing that 3 is greater than 2. So that makes us have 3,010 is greater than 2,040 by reading that. determining which one is lower. It was possible that this number could be higher. That's what we'll have to determine as we practice along the scale. But that is just my I do. Because I'm modeling that I do, I really want students to be able to understand that concept. So before I go through that, I will make sure we're scanning the room, checking for understanding, and go right into the we do process. Which is the smallest and which is the greatest? Still we're comparing and contrasting, but we're going to do this one together in the we do. So this answer would be the same. We're going to start with our first number because that's what we see. We see two different numbers, but they have some of the same base, but this is going to be where we need to be able to articulate where it is higher and the values are different if they are the same. So this time, walk me through it. I'm just going to do this first number first, Jones. I have my number set. Help me with this. I know that there is a 1 in the 1's place. How many times would I write it? Excellent job. I see I have a 2 in the 10's place. How many times would I write it?
2 times.
I see I have nothing in the hundreds place. I see I have a number in the thousands place. How many times would I write it?
3 times.
I see I have a number in the 10,000s place. How many times would I write it?
4 times.
Being that I see that and have it in agreement, I know I can do the next step is write that out, correct?
Yes.
So that would be 1, 2, 0, 3, 4. Is that right?
Yes.
How would I read that out loud?
43,000.
Do we say anything when it's blank?
No.
So what number do we pick up?
20
And
and 21.
so what would we say? 43,021. So we're still transforming it into word form. So I have 43,021. I also see another set. Let's do the second set. I see a number in the ones place. How many times would I write it?
2 times.
All right. I see a number I see no number in the tens place. What would I write?
0.
I see a number in the hundreds place. What would I write?
3 times.
3 what?
Hundreds. 3 times.
Thank you. Okay. I see a number in the into the thousands place. How many times would I write it?
You write it 5 times.
I would write it 5 times. I see a number in the 10,000s place. How many times would I write it?
4 times.
Just like we did in the previous set. All right, so based on that, just writing it out. Just writing it out. Help me write it out, everybody. Help me write it out. What will I see in this set? So I'm going to write
2,
2,
0,
uh-huh,
3,
uh-huh,
5,
uh-huh.
4.
Give yourself a hand. They'll do the clap and I'll do some check-ins. Make sure we just giving praise throughout the lesson. Make sure they're modeling with me. Now, there's something different that we have to compare and contrast. So, looking at values, do you see that there are some differences in each number set? But how do we know which one is the realest value of it? It's in the highest forms that we're looking at. So, we know because of our highest numbers, remember what I said? We started on the end where we see the 4 is the same, so they're equal. What's next?
The 3 and 5.
The 3 and the 5 are the different things. Which one is higher?
The 5.
The 5 is higher. So is 43 greater than 45? No. Is 45 greater than 43?
Yes.
Yes. So what symbol would help me notify that? Those are things we got to look back at. Would it be this symbol? This symbol? We know it's not equal. This one says 43 is greater than 45. This one says 43 is less than 45. Which one sounds right to you?
Less than.
A less than. Because this number is greater. The biggest number is where we keep our open. 45 is greater than that. So 43,000 is less than 45. So modeling this is a key thing to look for in collaborative planning. Letting them understand that and explaining those misconceptions. So based on this, we use the less than sign in this set in our we do versus the greater than set that we did in the I do. Because the students were able to move through that a little quicker, they know about the steps. We don't have to spend much time on that piece. We could just go right to the next part of the lesson. So based on that principle, I have 2 additional numbers, okay? And that we do. I want us to be very different than what I did in the I do. Because in the first set, I modeled the I do twice so that they could see 2 different concepts that still brought them to naming those forms. This time in the we do, I really want to be intentional so that they can see these sets running and how that works before I let them do this together. So this one would be in the you do alone section. And that will allow the students to have this with their partner. So I would say turn and talk to your neighbor, and I'll have that on the screen so they can see that piece like we did in the previous slide and thinking through those concepts. So we would go back to our number 6. So on the screen, we have 2 numbers. I'm going to let you do the number on the right. I'm going to do the number on the right. You'll do the number on the left. So you'll do 32,434. I'm going to do 32,644. So I'll go ahead and place my numbers where they need to be so that they can do it and compare it and conversate. So I have my number set. Put my 6 where it needs to be. I have a number here, so I'm gonna put my 2 where it needs to be. I don't have the millions, but I do have 100,000. So I can look at putting my 3 right here. Okay, so I have my number in place. So we have 2 numbers, correct?
Mm-hmm. So we have 2 distinct numbers. Let's go through our learning process to make sure that we are clear on what we have. So on our whiteboards, we would go ahead and write our place, which would be what we see. So I know I have in my 1s, my 10s, my 100s, my 1000s, my 10,000. Let's talk about how many times would we write the 1s? 4 times.
How many times would we write the 10s? For
you.
my set, I would write it 4 times. For your set, you would write it
3 times.
And when in our comparison, which one is higher and greater?
The 4.
Okay, so we're seeing the difference there. All right, then in the 100s, what's different?
You have a 6 and I have a 4.
Okay, so my number is different. How many times would I write mine?
6
6 times.
How many times would you write yours?
4 times.
So there would be some things that we would see them writing on the whiteboard. Then I would see my thousands and my 10,000s remain the same. So I have a different little thing. These two numbers are matching. So there is equal. Where's the difference in our number?
Right here, the hundreds and the tens place.
The hundreds and the tens place, because remember, how do we read?
Left to right.
Left to right. So if these are the same and equal, there is no difference. The difference started happening here. This number is higher than this number. So if we did our comparison circle, what would we say on our analogy?
32,434 is less than 32,644.
And that is correct. Why is that correct? Because of what?
The hundreds place.
Mhm.
That number is smaller than that number.
So what would be different in this portion of the lesson would be different than what we did in the previous PowerPoint. When you remember we had those checking for understanding questions, because at this point they should be able to articulate place value because we've done it in the previous set. Now they need to be able to articulate the difference. They know to be able to recite standard word form, and they should be able to tell me where those differences lie. So just like we did in the think pair sharing option, and they had to do it with pairs, that is what we could expect students to see when they do that practice. And then they could be able to articulate to me what is greater than or less than, or is it equal? Because if all numbers were the same, we would then use the equal sign, but when there is a difference, we would not. So those are things I want students to be able to build as they work through this lesson. So as we work through the set, and I want to give a close to see if the students actually are mastering the standard, there will be two things that I'm going to look for. This will be what we call the postlude, their exit ticket. And they would be able to do the comparison based on numbers, knowing the place value of numbers. They would be able to see those sets and where those comparisons lie, so they could be able to work through those independently in practice. They would be able to see in the difference that this one is greater because there is a whole different place value. They would be able to see here, this is less than because the value is higher on the right than it is on the left once they go through the practice of what we modeled in instruction. So these would be the way I would know if the students got the answers right when I'm seeing them have these answers on their markers for that placement. So those are things you can see, and I would know whether I can move on or need to go back and reteach. As I get through the week, I also want to challenge my students, my superstars, on the following. I'm going to give them a word set, but in practice, this would be something we would do as we build to the lesson. So they would have this word problem said, 4 friends play the game. The player with the most points win. Use the information from the table beside to order the number of points each player earned from least to greatest, then name the person who won the game. The game is irrelevant here about the people. This is really about the same place value that they had in comparing numbers. So I would have students compare Amy and Bonnie together, and I would have them compare Jeff and Rick, and whoever had the highest and lowest of each. And then I would look at whose numbers is the highest of all values, so that we know based on ranking, this would be what a child would have once they have the right answers, that this would be the set. So students would be able to know that Bonnie had the highest because of 2,976 and can articulate that. I would know that Jeff would be second in line because 2,709. I know Rick would be next because 2,699 is less than 2,709, but is greater in value than 2,398. So my order of words problems would be like this, and this would be
how students will be able to show me they have mastered this. This will not be given during the whole lesson. This will be something I can expect students to do at the end of the week as they continue to build through the practice. But for the most part, this is what I ask them to do to show me the standards. So with that being said, we would close by asking, why is it important that we learn this today? So Ms. Jones, tell us, why would that be important that we learned about the place value and those three things in comparing and contrasting numbers?
To know about place value, to know about comparing two numbers, the larger number to the biggest number, and to know
You said the biggest thing, knowing your place value. You remember we said we have to know our place, and then knowing the value of that place, and is it greater or less than? So if that is correct, and we go back to looking at the standard, did we meet this objective? Students will be able to read and write multi-digit whole numbers. You were able to read and write it, correct? Using standard form, word form, expanded form, because we expanded it into our charts. We also wrote it out and we compared and contrasted. So we unpacked this standard in its fullest to make sure the students were able to understand this and articulate that. In my classroom, I could use an app like Sway to ask them to record their responses to what they felt and reasoning, and I could give them immediate feedback on the film based on what they did. So those are things you can put into further planning as you plan throughout the lesson. With that being said, I will also show out one more thing in my lesson. Just going back to the main thing we talked about in the beginning. How will this be assessed? So in the end game, I'll always make sure they can answer this question based on that. Now, Ms. Jones, after what we have practiced, what would you say is your answer to this question?
Devin is correct because 13,426 is greater than 100 digit and 12,389.
Yes, because this option says it's in the thousands digit, and that's not correct. So we will eliminate that. We would eliminate these two because they're saying that 12,000 is greater, and the only option that students should be able to give me is this. Because we took them through all of that standard, they can be able to answer that TCAP question. So talking through some things and expectations of what we saw from the lesson. Very important that when you come to collaborative planning, you bring those hands-on materials that you want students to use for the lesson so that I can see that and we can practice through that, build through misconceptions. Just like when I was doing the model lesson, you were able to see me talk through some of those concepts that I knew students would have a problem with, and they would point that out. I will also be able to share with you some immediate feedback on how those things could be received. So these are things that will help us make collaborative planning an even meaningful opportunity for students, and that you understand two things. What you put before me is the same thing you put before kids, but we want to be intentional on what we put before them and making sure that everything leads to results on TCAP. Have a good one.